Yeah, it's very delayed. It's very
It's
delayed.
like, it takes like 20 seconds.
Yeah, I would be careful about reading. Because if you don't read.
I was trying to figure out how to like
And we get like, I don't know, 25 of them.
mute it.
So we do each
welcome to our first Brown Bag Lunch and Learn series of the fall semester. My name is Mrs. Kulal. I go to Shiher Harpanas, and then I am the program coordinator for the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I'm really happy to have all of you here, and I'm also welcoming our online community since we are live streaming today here. So for today's session is combating student food insecurity, and our presenter for today is Matt Hall, who is the Associate Director of Health and Prevention Education. And once again, we are all welcoming you to be with us today. So before we begin to our session for today, there are a couple of announcements that I will do for you. And first, I would like to begin with our round of acknowledgement. The Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion acknowledges the full respect of the indigenous peoples on whose lands SUNY Brockport now stands, the Onondaga notion of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. As an academic community, we are dedicated to recognizing and promoting indigenous people's rights in our teaching, scholarship, and service. And we support the inclusion of indigenous students, staff, and faculty on our campus. So today's session is going to include a presentation from our presenter, Matt Hall. And then later on, we are going to have a question and answer session. And once again, I would like to kindly remind that we are live streaming today's session. So especially during the question and answer session, I'm kindly asking our members in the audience to raise their hands. And so I will make sure that, so I'll just your questions, and then so it's something that I would like to remind you for all of you today. As I said, today's presentation is going to begin with our presenter, Matt Hall, and then our graduate diversity fellow, Zoe White, and then she's going to arrange the time, and then so guys that we are all tracking this time. So I always like to also thank you for our undergraduate students from the Journalism and Broadcasting Division. And especially I would like to thank you, John Watts and Tim Pratt. So I highly appreciate your cooperation. So without further ado, please help me welcoming Matthew Hall, who will be speaking with us on the combating student food and insecurity. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Good afternoon now. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the first lecture of the semester, right? So I'm very pleased to have been asked to present today on combating student food insecurity as part of OEDI's learning series that happens throughout the semester. It's always a good session, so I encourage everybody to attend throughout the year. Thank you particularly to Dr. Brown, Dr. Davis for inviting me again, and to you all for being engaged members of the audience. As Dr. Brown said, my name is Matt Hall. I'm the Associate Director of Health Promotion and Prevention Education at the Center for Gender and Sexual Diversity. And so I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the journey that we've had over the last couple of years at SUNY Brockport as pertains to combating student food insecurity. So what I intend to do in terms of a bit of a narrative of our journey is talk about what we see in the literature that is not unique to SUNY Brockport, but it certainly manifests within our community. And then I want to share with you some specifics. In the spring of 2023, we conducted a basic needs study as part of our work to get a sense of how insecurities of various forms were showing up among our student body. And so we can take the broad message that we see in the literature review and apply that specifically. And then towards the end of our session, we'll talk a little bit about the centralization of our basic needs processes and the opening of our food pantry on campus. And we'll talk a little bit about how you all can get involved and attend our grand opening and a number of other ways in which we can exist together within the community doing this work. So let's go ahead and dive in. A lot of this work, I think, particularly on the college tore away a veil that obscured a lot of social issues among our students. And we know that our students with multiply marginalized identities also experience these deprivations and gaps and insecurities at even higher rates, including access to food, healthcare, housing, and general overall well-being. And so that burden was not equally placed on the shoulders of our students. So what the literature said during COVID is that roughly 35 to 32% of students across the country were experiencing food insecurity issues. So that's both availability and access. Because of travel restrictions, because of job restrictions, there was less available financially and less available because of those COVID pandemic restrictions. Of course, all of this rolls downhill. So because of those financial restrictions, a third of our college students were also experiencing housing insecurity, which saw a dramatic spike in difficulty paying rent on one end of the spectrum all the way to houselessness or homelessness at the other end of the spectrum. All of these insecurities intersect with each other in a variety of ways. And so when a student is experiencing something like houselessness or food insecurity, there is a cumulative effect, and these things compound on each other. And we know that a student cannot succeed academically if they're going unfed, if they don't have the energy to study, if they're hungry. And so that really showed up quite a bit in the data that I'm going to show you specific to SUNY Brockport in just a little bit. As a compounding factor, we know that the overall health outcomes for students who experience insecurities of one kind or another are there. And they show up in the overall well-being and the accumulation of health equity deficits. And then in terms of food insecurity, financial insecurity, we know that the academic performance, as I mentioned, is going to be impacted. And so what we saw in the literature from students navigating COVID was an overall lower academic performance, GPA, retention, et cetera. This was, of course, not new, as I mentioned. These issues existed before the pandemic. And as I said, they existed in higher spaces for our historically oppressed populations, our multiply marginalized students, et cetera. So in terms of the overall nutritional quality of what students use and need to thrive academically, personally, and in terms of their well-being, insecurity, which exists on a spectrum, first places us in a position of nutritional deficit and then hunger. And so a lot of decisions are made about what kinds of food that are affordable, and unfortunately, oftentimes the research shows that they are less nutritious. I've already mentioned how the pandemic impacted jobs, but we saw very specifically that jobs that a lot of college students have were the first to be hit and hit the hardest, oftentimes in the service industry like restaurants, bars, and of course all of our students working on campus who went home during COVID and didn't have the opportunity to work in the dining hall or within our offices. And the biggest sort of compounding factor within all of this is that our systems, our social systems as a country and as a state are not always set up to best serve our college students, particularly in times of crisis like the COVID pandemic. So for a good chunk of our students, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, was not something that they were able to access. Certainly there are issues of stigma associated with applying, but many students simply were not and continue not to be eligible for SNAP funds to assist in their nutrition. And because they exist in a tax space that is a little bit liminal as a college student, and they're claimed by their parents, our college students were not getting those same stimulus checks that we as adults were getting. And so that, again, compounds the ability to pay rent and purchase food. And the overall impact is a significantly higher percentage of students who experience food insecurity, 15% higher than 2019. And this was, again, very pertinent for our students who are also parents, our students who are non-traditional, et cetera. And as I mentioned, with that nutritional deficit, then we see things in terms of health outcomes around low nutrition but high calorie foods, sort of further impairing health overall. What we also see in the literature about how we respond to student food insecurity as a field of higher education has quite a bit with sort of how we put our values as institutions and as a field into operation. What was a really interesting trend throughout the data, throughout the literature on student food insecurity is this concept of the worthy poor. We all carry our mental models and internal biases with us, and we all sort of exist in spaces where we process social messages about what it means to be poor, who is poor, why people are poor. And so they saw, despite best intentions in the literature, that administrators on campus were operating within that lens of bias and sometimes sort of shutting down students who were seeking help because they may or may not have fallen into that concept of the worthy poor. Furthermore, we are, as a field, figuring out how to do this work on the fly in some cases. But what that has produced is what is called institutional hot potato in a number of the pieces of literature. Students go to office to office to office, trying to find the help that they need. And if they are not able to find it in office A and have to go to office B and office C, there is a feeling of dejection, and it shuts down students' willingness to be vulnerable, open up, and ask for help. And of course, this again has that that deficit in terms of physical, emotional, and well-being that is added to the complexity of nutritional deficits. Now we're experiencing those social deficits as well. So as I mentioned, in the spring of this past academic year, in 2023, we distributed a basic needs survey to get a good sense in a post-COVID world, semi-post-COVID world, what does insecurity look like on Brockport's campus? How do we align with what we're seeing in the national literature? The survey went out to all students on campus, including those who are traditionally only online or only attend classes at the REOC. We didn't have a huge response rate, but I think despite that, it told us a lot of really interesting things about what our students are experiencing. So I don't want to say that this is a generalizable data set, but I think it gives us some rich information about what some of our most insecure students are experiencing. So I'm going to share a little bit of that. This is not the full data set. I'm happy to share that with anybody who would like it, but it gives you some overall highlights. So on this first set of data, we're talking very specifically about experiences of living and houselessness. While the majority of our students do have a safe place to live and regularly have a safe place to live, there are a large number of students within this 300-person data set that don't, in fact, have a safe place to live, whether that is sometimes or all the time. We see quite a number of them showing up in that space. And we see that people are experiencing forms of victimization because of housing insecurity. So there were a number of folks who reported physical, sexual violence, harassment, a negative physical or mental health outcome, or a number of other things. That was, of the 300, about a third had experienced some form of negative outcome associated with houselessness. In terms of food, we, again, have a number of students who do have access to food regularly, nutritious food regularly, but a large chunk of students who don't. And a large chunk of students who cannot afford to buy groceries weekly. Yeah.
Because it's so light.
Oh, yes.
I wonder if you could just give us some more information. Or perhaps we can turn down a light, but I'm concerned for you streaming. But for those in the audience, I think we should be able to see, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So the folks who are streaming are able to see because they're on that computer over there. But for the folks in the audience here in the room, our orange section is the group of folks who agree. The light blue is strongly agree, gray is disagree, and yellow is strongly disagree. So in terms of percentages, in terms of the N, overall N, we've got about strongly agree, I have access to nutritious food, 93 out of the total number. Agree is 132, disagree is 42, and then it's showing up as 1.2, but it should be 12. 12 students are in strong disagreement that they have regular access to nutritious food. In terms of being able to afford grocery trips every week, we have 57 students who strongly agree, 104 that agree, 69 that disagree, and again, 12 that strongly disagree. So what does that mean for day-to-day activities or behaviors? We have a number of students that are skipping meals in order to save money. So we have 43 students out of 300 who say, I frequently skip meals to save money, 94 sometimes, 66 rarely, and only 70 out of 300 say never. And in terms of how that skipping shows up, why are we skipping? I've skipped meals in order to pay for bills, other essentials, or pay for school-related expenses. Our meal skippers frequently, 32, 75 sometimes, 59 rarely, and 107 never. We also see insecurity showing up in other ways. So I've missed classes because of transportation issues. And within the sort of qualitative pieces of the survey, we see this being unable to pay for car repairs, not able to regularly access public transportation, having difficulty getting from the main campus to downtown and vice versa. So we have a number of students that have in fact missed classes because of transportation. Again, overall, we have, let's see here, my numbers are showing up kind of funny. Frequently, it's only 9, but we see sometimes that goes up to 24 for sometimes, and rarely to 54. We also know that students are not able to afford their medications all the time. And so only 120 out of the 300 are able to always afford their medications, and that goes down from there. People also are missing due dates for bills and engaging in sex work. So we have students who are passing their due dates on bills or gone without food because they have to pay for other essentials or medical costs or mental health care. So we have, again, 100 and, let's see here, that we have 33 people who are rarely missing their due dates, 21 who are sometimes, 10 who are frequently, and 3 who are always missing their due dates, and the large blue chunk is never. And the one that was sort of sad and disappointing in a lot of ways to see was the position that students are placed in having to engage in sex work in order to pay for food, shelter, and school-related costs. And so it is a relatively small percentage, but we have roughly 15 students out of 300 who reported engaging in various forms of sex work, including online sex work, telephone sex work, selling images of themselves, and what we might consider traditional sex work. And this is not within the slides, but that also very much is connected to experiences of sexual assault and other forms of gender-based victimization, which came out very much within the qualitative pieces of this survey. So where do we go from there? You may or may not know that there has been a long tradition of addressing basic needs issues on campus for a number of years here. Dr. Karen Logsdon has done this work, others have done this work as well, but we're working very intently to centralize this work, make it easier, make it more accessible, reduce stigma, and help students enter a pathway where they can succeed and get the help that they need. So about a year ago, we were given some funds to sort of begin piloting some programming around this. And throughout last year, we met with students through a sort of case management cycle. Students were showing up with everything from housing issues, food issues, not able to purchase textbooks, a number of other things. Between March and May of spring semester of 2023, staff in health promotion worked with 10 students. And what we saw in some cases was an easy fix, or connecting them to the Golden Eagle Opportunity Fund, or something more easily tangible. But we also ran into the same problems that our students ran into. Landlords who wouldn't answer the phone. Landlords that wouldn't respond to emails, and the list goes on. And so we have begun to think more critically about how we can sort of make this easier and help take that burden that we are experiencing, trying to help students off of their shoulders so that they can think about being well, staying in class, and succeeding academically. So you probably won't be able to see this very well either in person or online, but it gives you a good idea of the structure that we have created. And I'll show you how students can enter this sort of portal in just a second. But staff in Hazen have been working very diligently all summer and into this fall semester, sort of creating a regular system or a regular structure so that students who need basic needs support have a very identifiable pathway into getting help. And so I'm going to show you in just a second the information that we gave to faculty before the start of the school year. And we have had a number of students self-refer since the beginning of the year. But basically, we've outlined what we perceive to be some of our top issues, recognizing that other issues may also come up, and basically a funnel for how students can get help, and we can respond to the myriad of issues that they might have, whether that is food, elder care, transportation, you name it. And so we have built out a clinic through Hazen where we can begin to sort of formalize this and create connections not only on campus, but with our partners in Monroe County as well. So feel free to scan that QR code. That was provided to faculty over the summer in anticipation of the start of this academic year, along with some language about what it was for. But basically, we know that oftentimes students are disclosing various forms of insecurity to folks that they have a relationship with, whether that is a faculty mentor or a staff mentor or what have you. And it basically is an intake form, and we get a good sense on the back end of where they're struggling. So I would say definitely of the ones that have come in so far this year, of which I think there are about 8 or 10, food has been at the top of the, on the top of the list. And so as part of our promotion of the pantry, this QR code will be displayed around campus so that students can continue to self-refer. We saw success with this in the spring. Every student that came to us for case management help in the spring of 23 self-disclosed and came forward. So we're continuing to see an increased willingness to have this conversation, even when it's uncomfortable. The students that sort of go through this process do that little intake form on the QR code, and then that is basically sent to our care team, which is myself, Karen Logsden, Michelle Colesso, and our new Associate Director of the Health Center, Karen Parker. And it is sort of triaged from there, depending on what the student needs. The student will tell us exactly what they are looking for, but then we have some logic built in the back end that will help plug in some resources right away. And that will come out through Medicat, which is our electronic medical record system. And I'll show you that in just a moment. Oh, here we go. So within the electronic medical record system, this is a separate clinic from health or counseling, so there's no overlap there. But basically what it allows us to do is have confidential communication if the student is not comfortable speaking on the phone or in person, but they can do so through the EMR portal, and some psychoeducational materials can be sent through, as well as referrals to community partners, for example. Those who are looking for a SNAP application would get a referral to our nutritional outreach education program in Monroe County. And as you probably know, or hopefully know, we have sort of had a soft opening of our pantry on campus. The pantry at SUNY Brockport has been open for about 2 weeks now, and as of this morning, we had 78 people come through the pantry already. We are partnering with FoodLink, and we're able to establish a MOU with FoodLink with a partnership with BSG, Brockport Student Government, Health Promotion, Prevention, Education, and FoodLink. And we will have bi-weekly deliveries of food in support of our students seeking that help. The pantry itself is located in Daly Hall on the ground floor. It's very accessible, which is nice, and students are welcome. But so are faculty, staff, and community members as part of our agreement with FoodLink, which is important because it takes a village to support students, and sometimes the village also needs support. Within the pantry itself, we have the food that we have had donated very kindly. We have the food that's been delivered by FoodLink, but we also have things like menstrual products, referrals for clothing in the career closet or the queer closet, paper products like toilet paper, paper towels, and we're working on expanding our access to baby-related items like diapers, wipes, and baby food. At the moment, we are staffing the pantry with health promotion staff, but we've had some very gracious, lovely volunteers from the community, the campus community, including some of the folks in the room today, who will be helping us staff the pantry as well. But very wonderfully, SUNY has put a huge investment into this work. And the chancellor was here on campus just about 3 weeks ago to talk about the importance of food insecurity work and addressing it, as well as to celebrate with us the opening of our pantry. And in combination with all of that, there is some incoming investment funds in helping us support this work, which will include maintaining the supply of food within the pantry itself. So I mentioned that we'll be receiving bi-weekly deliveries from FoodLink, and within that process we go through their online ordering portal. So we are somewhat subject to what they have available at any given time. So for example, when I was putting next week's order into their portal last week, there were certain things that were gone by the time I was able to submit it this week. So we are a little bit subject to that, but we've been able to get a pretty good spread of things across sort of the nutritional, I guess we're not calling it a food pyramid anymore, right? My plate. So various forms of proteins, dairies, carbs, etc. And this is open during our traditional working hours for the moment. We're going to see exactly when we have people coming through and tailor those hours to sort of student and community needs as we go. But for the moment, while we're sussing that out, we're on an 8 to 5 model. We may look at expanding that a little bit in the spring semester, just depending on how things go. For the folks who are in academic areas in the audience, we are always accepting academic interns. Historically, we've taken interns from social work, public health, and psychology as part of our portfolio of work in Hippie, but we know that there's a particular interest in food insecurity work on our campus. So if you have a student who's looking to do an internship, we of course would love to talk about that. I mentioned that everyone within our community is able to obtain food from the pantry, or anything that's in the pantry really, and they're able to do so 1 time per week. Now, there is no minimum, there is no maximum rather. So if somebody is presenting at the food pantry, what they will be guided through as part of their intake is a discussion on household size. That is what FoodLink wants us to be aware of, and so we are cognizant of who's living in the household. Do we have any folks with needs that might be related to the elderly or toddlers or what have you, and then we provide them a guide based on household size that allows them to find what they would need for 3 days or 5 days. And so we can provide them that baseline, but they're certainly welcome to take more than that. And we have that in a variety of languages as well, because we know this affects folks across the community. In terms of your participation, we would certainly love folks to consider signing up to do a volunteer shift either regularly or once every so often as part of our work in staffing the pantry. I think it, 1, helps us make it further available, but 2, also reduces the tension and stigma that students or other users might experience when we're normalizing this work. So anybody in the audience is welcome to scan that. And of course, we're also welcoming all donations as well. Canned goods, menstrual products, paper products, baby items, all of that is necessary, and we've gone through it quite a bit. And then finally, as part of our work throughout the last year, we, along with a number of other schools, participated in the Stomp Out Hunger initiative this previous spring, which was a sort of generation point of a lot of this work as well. And we partnered with Monroe County Department of not Department of Higher Education, but Department of Human Services, to bring out the mobile pantry and do SNAP applications. And we also created a Stomp Out Hunger Fund that raised $1,200 on the day and has continued to grow since, which is very much in support of overall response to student food insecurity, but is also helping us with funding the pantry's initial beginnings as well. So if you wanted to make a donation to the fund, that would of course be very welcome as well as part of our work. And then you're all invited on Monday next week, the 2nd of October, from 12 to 1 in Daly Hall. We are having the grand opening of the pantry, and we'll be having remarks from Dr. McPherson, Dr. Acker, myself, and we'll have a nice ribbon cutting ceremony. And we'll also be having a mini resource fair as well. So folks from our community in Brockport are coming, including the First Baptist Community Church, who's been a really great partner. They've provided a number of emergency snack bags to our students throughout the last year. The Hygiene Bank from Brockport will be present, but so will community partners from further afield, including Janice Griffin, who is a Nutritional Outreach Education Program Coordinator for Monroe County. And this initiative is going to be sort of the kickoff of a once-monthly SNAP clinic on campus, where students can make appointments with her to go through the SNAP process and avoid some of the pitfalls that we've seen with students who've been trying to navigate that on their own. And so we're really lucky that she's both deeply interested and passionate and excited to do that work with us. So we'd love to see you all there. There'll be a little reception, and you can also see the space and check out what we have on offer. Any questions? Yeah, Stephanie.
What specific foods do you have? Like, could you get some liquid, broad, umbrella, but
Yes.
could you repeat my question?
Yeah, so for the folks in the audience who are live streaming, Stephanie's question was, what kind of food do we have in the pantry at the moment? So as I mentioned, it is somewhat dependent on what FoodLink has available, but we have the possibility of shelf-stable, refrigerated, and frozen food. So currently we have a lot of shelf-stable canned vegetables, peanut butter, oats, pasta sauce, in terms of our shelf-stable items. We also have quite a bit of frozen fruit as well, frozen meat products, so chicken, beef, turkey, and then we have shelf-stable milk, including soy milk, oat milk, and mushroom-based milk, and dairy products like cheese as well, quite a lot of cheese actually. So if anyone needs a pizza night, come get some cheese. And then we have really nice tofu as well, which has been a big hit actually. Yeah. Yes.
I'm gonna just add on to Stephanie there. Do you have fresh fruit and vegetables, or is that something that people can donate? How does that work?
Okay. Yes, so the question is, do we have fresh fruits and vegetables? At present, we do not. FoodLink does offer them on occasion, but it's dependent on what's available. However, we absolutely would accept them as donation, absolutely.
And my other question is, if a student wants to use the food pantry, do they use their ID or anything? It's all confidential, correct?
Yes, the only information that we track as part of our MOU with FoodLink is household size. So we'll know the number of people in the household, if there's any elderly or minors, and that's it. So they're not required to give us any identifying information around their student status, share an ID, anything like that. They just have to scan a QR code to fill out that 3-question survey. And then, of course, if somebody doesn't have a cell phone with that technology available, we can do that manually as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you talk about the difference between houselessness and homelessness?
Yeah.
Using the terms interchangeably.
Yeah, I wouldn't call myself an expert on this, but the question is, what's the difference between houselessness and homelessness? And I think we're seeing a push towards houselessness because I think it recognizes that home setup can be very different for different people, and what it means to have a safe place to live might be different for different people. That's sort of my read on it, but yeah, would you add anything?
No, I was just curious.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, so we're seeing that much more with students, or anyone really, who doesn't live in a traditional nuclear family home. They might be couch surfing. They might be, accessing a shelter, so they don't have a traditional home, but there might be a setup where they have shelter, or, a roof over their heads. Yeah. Was there a question in the back?
So any food producing agency like the dining halls or the union produces recently expired food, still good,
Mm-hmm.
but then they just throw it out. So is
Yeah.
it tied into that at all? I mean, what is acceptable from, because you have this food pantry, but yet these places produce food that is still viable, but they often throw it in the dumpster because it's expired by
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is, how are we partnering with folks on campus who produce food, but it might be expired for sale in the dining hall or the square? And so that is an interesting question, and it actually comes up quite a bit around expired food. So more broadly, there's a little bit of education with the student users of the pantry about what expiration dates mean. So we've had folks ask about expired cans, for example. So there's a bit of work, showing them the FDA's advice around shelf-stable expiration dates and letting them know that shelf-stable items are still good for about 18 months after the expiration date. In terms of partnering with folks on campus, that's been a big topic of conversation within the SUNY Food Pantry Committee. There are institutions that do have a relationship with their dining services to take some of those recently expired items and put them in the fridge in their pantry. We're not there yet, since we've only been open for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, but it is our goal overall that hopefully we can take an expired PB&J sandwich and put it in the pantry, or what have you. Because it is important. It attends to both the need but also food waste. Any questions from online? All right. Yes,
I have one more.
Dr. Davis.
So in terms of stigma around, the students have around getting help for these various things, what ways can we as a community help reduce that stigma?
Yeah.
Maybe in programs, conversations, in terms of faculty and staff. What is it from your perspective and what you're saying that we can do to help that, so students feel more comfortable going to get the help that they need?
Yeah, so the question is, how do we reduce stigma overall as a community? And I think there's sort of a Swiss cheese model to that, like we say in public health. There's no one right or wrong way, but if we do sort of a variety of approaches, overall we'll see little nudges in the culture and our environmental approach. And so I think one of the main topics that we see in the overall literature is about the placement of the food pantry. Sometimes there's the inclination to put it in a closet in a dark corner so that people may not be seen because they might feel uncomfortable, which I think is really real and valid. But what comes out is that students who use the pantry and see it as a regular resource in a highly trafficked place actually experience much lower levels of stigma than those who may need it but don't use it. So I think that there's that piece of it. And then I think it's very much how we talk about it, socialize it, and norm it. So one of our departmental goals for the year is thinking about basically a social norms campaign around basic needs. So highlighting the positive pro-social outcomes associated with help-seeking behaviors, rather than highlighting, hungry students are more likely to fail. The approach would be to highlight the successes associated with using it. And so naturally, in coming with that, I think we need to sort of collectively be on the same page as a university community about how we talk about it. So having it show up in spaces both physical and digital and theoretical, is really important. We've seen a lot of uptick in use just associated with a handful of faculty putting this information in their syllabus. If we make that sort of a normal expectation that doesn't feel weird and called out and othered, I think it provides sort of a baseline. But then I think it also comes to how we are reacting as people. I think there is a fear around doing or saying the wrong thing that sometimes puts us in a place of inaction. And so being able to refer somebody, walk somebody over, have a conversation in class without it feeling like weird and awkward, which of course takes practice, is important because it helps to normalize. And then in terms of long-term culture change, of course, that takes time, so we have to keep at it. You know, the campaign that we're developing this year can't be one and done, and so we have to continue to invest over time. And I compare this very much to the work that Hippie does around sexual assault and alcohol. You know, alcohol work is far further ahead than sexual assault work. Sexual assault work is far further ahead than basic needs. But it all has to do with the amount of literal decades that are invested into the response. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
There's several churches in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Same business. Are you networking with them?
Yes, so First Baptist is one of the ones that we partner with the most often. So they have their one time a month food shelter or food bank open. And we have done lots of referrals to that in the lead up to opening our pantry. And then you've got me on the spot, so I'm forgetting the name of the church in Clarkson that hosts the food or the hygiene bank, but we're partnering with them as well. I'm thinking it's Jubilee Christian Church. Yeah. Great questions. Thank you all so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Matt, for this valuable work and also sharing your expertise with us. And thank you so much for our audience here and as well as our online audience. So there is some worksheet that includes a QR code for our post-event survey. And please take the time to complete the survey because we are always looking for your feedback. And for those who were with us online today, so our graduate diversity fellow Zoe is going to send you the post-event survey. Once again, thank you so much, Matt, and thank you so much for everybody for being with us. And we do have some cookies, some chips, so please don't be shy, and then just help yourselves.
What's the date and the title of our next rounding?
Sure, that is going to be on October 27th, and then Dr. Angela Tomshelf is going to share her research with us on the end-to-end therapy, activism in South Africa. So, yeah, thank you. All right, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.